What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the Neighborhood Podcast. I'm one of the hosts of the podcast. My name's Kevin Valentin.
And I'm the other host of the podcast. My name is Kyle Dabro. Kev, I gotta be honest. I know we agreed you were gonna do the lead in, but when I hit record, I swear to God, I was gonna say, "What's up, you guys? Welcome to the Neighborhood Podcast." I was this close to saying it.
Yo, that goes to show as often as we do this, like these mistakes, these funny little miscues happen all the time. Like this is why Kyle and I always say, like, if we had an opportunity to do like bloopers, I swear you guys would crack up with the amount of
Um,
shit we just make fun of.
you guys don't even know how many freaking double, triple, quadruple takes that we do, just because of the little stutters, or we're trying to say a word and it's not said properly and we got to start all over. Like, you guys would have an hour worth of content just based off of that if we just decided to keep those. But
A
that
blooper
was
reel would be hilarious.
it. I held back though. I was thinking, it's like, all right, now Kev's got this one. I just got to sit back and shut up here. So I got that one right. So I mean, I'll take that one in
We held
stride.
we held it together, man. It's been a little bit. We haven't done an episode in about a week, so it's good to be back in the booth. How was your Thanksgiving, bro?
Bro, I was just about to ask you the same thing, bro. It was chill. Got to kick it with the fam. Actually, to be honest with you, not that much politics discussed at the family table for dinner time this time.
It's
It was
good.
actually kind of nice. So, all in all, bro, we had like a 23, 24 pound turkey, bro. That thing was a beast. That thing
It's
was
a
a
big ass
monster.
turkey.
Hell yeah, dude. And that thing, it's all gone. There's no leftovers. Like them, those leftovers are gone.
As
So,
it should be. It's Sunday. Thanksgiving was Thursday. Leftovers
and
should not last farther than Saturday, in my opinion.
I think we finished it up. My dad and I finished it up Saturday night because we made like turkey. We made like turkey sandwiches. So I think we pretty much finished out what's left from it. But yeah, it was a big ass bird, bro. 23 pounds,
Shit.
23 pounds. I remember my dad was telling me, and he said it was 23 pounds. I'm like, what? Thing's a monster.
Hey, as long as everybody got to eat, I mean, on my side, I got to see relatives I haven't seen in, I want to say a decade, if not like a little bit
Mm,
less, like 9 years or so. So, like, my cousins are not little anymore. They're all teenagers, two of them in college, one of them's graduating high school early. So, like, shout out to them.
early.
Just kind of crazy seeing them remembering, like, basically they were like little squabble dobbles, as I would call them. They were like babies in my eyes, and
Li-
now it's like they're adults. It's just crazy.
Bro, they were the little jits back in the day.
Yeah, bro. It's just I opened the door, said what's up to their mom and dad, like my aunt, my uncle, and then like legit, like they came out of their rooms like all cool and like walking out like sup, and I was like,
I don't
who the
remember.
fuck? I was like, who the fuck? Who the
The,
hell is this?
yeah, I'm like, bro, like you're grown now, but the last time I saw you, bro, you were down here.
Yeah, bro, they were like
Like,
at my hip. It's just mad weird. So it was cool to see them. We had good eats too. You know what I'm saying? We had the Spanish rice, we had the stuff and the yams, the sweet potatoes, the turkey, the ham. Like we had the works, so it was good. We had the coquito, the Puerto Rican eggnog. That shit was fire. So I mean, like again, Thanksgiving was popping. We were gone for about 4 or 5 days just to kind of get out of Fort Myers, but it was good. Came back yesterday, just chilling, picked up the dog today, so everything is back to normal. And my week off, unfortunately, comes to an end back tomorrow morning.
yeah, back to the grind, bro, just like
Yeah,
everybody
man.
else. And I mean, bro, we're a month out from Christmas too, so
Don't remind me, man. My wallet's already screaming. I'm the idiot that asked out a girl a week before Christmas.
I haven't even started my Christmas shopping yet. But I know that's going to be a pretty penny once we start getting around to it. But we'll reach that point when we get there. But I,
Exactly.
I gotta say, I know it's been a minute since you've been in the booth, but bro, we had a pretty solid slate this past weekend. So
Hell yeah.
just to dive into what we're going to go over, the first game we're going to talk about is the Jets and the Bears game. Mike White, backup quarterback for the Jets, replaces Zach Wilson and just goes off, just torches the Bears. The Jets put up 30 points against the Bears. Granted, the Bears didn't have Justin Fields. That definitely hindered them when you have to replace him with Trevor Simeon. Typically not going to go that well. And we'll just kind of dive into, is Mike White going to be the future for the Jets at the quarterback spot? So I know Kev's got a lot to say about that one. So I know Kev's kind of gnawing at the bit just to get to that segment. After that, we'll talk about how the Buccaneers kind of screwed the pooch against the Cleveland Browns. They were up 17-10 in the fourth quarter. Jacoby Brissett leads a game-tying drive, completed an amazing pass to David Njoku, who came down with a one-handed grab to put it to a 17-17 score. And then Nick Chubb ran the game-winning touchdown with about, I want to say, like 20 to 25 seconds left in overtime. Browns win 23-17. We'll just talk about that game a little bit. We'll talk about where the Bucs are to go from here. We'll talk about the Seahawks basically just getting into a track meet with the Raiders. Unfortunately for them, they fall to the Raiders in overtime. They lost by the score of 40-34. So kind of goes to show that it was a high-scoring game. And it was something that, personally, I picked the Seahawks to win that game and talked about it a couple days ago. Got that one wrong, but, it is what it is. After that, we'll talk about the impressive win streak that the Commanders have been on the last couple of weeks. They have been one of the more impressive teams, I'd say, the last month or so. And they're currently sitting at a 7-5 record in a really competitive NFC East right now. So we'll talk about their recent success. And I know Kev's actually pretty giddy about that one just because, bro, the Commanders have really been playing solid football the last couple of weeks. And then pretty much to round out most of the NFL games that we'll talk about this week, we'll talk about the Bengals getting a huge road win against the Titans. With the win, the Bengals bump up to a 7-4 record, and they're currently tied with the Ravens for first place in the AFC North. But based on how the matchups have gone this year so far, the Baltimore Ravens still own the tiebreaker over the Bengals. There's still a game yet to be played between those two teams. And we'll kind of dive into who we think is going to be that AFC North division champ when it's all said and done, since there's only about a month and a half left in the regular season. And then Kev is going to round out the episode with one of his epic rants. He's going to dive into UNC basketball. They've lost the last two games. The last one that they just lost was, Kev, they lost in quadruple overtime. It's a long game. Obviously, one of the best teams in the country. They were ranked number 1 in the country before losing their first game, and then they lost the second game to, I believe, Alabama, correct? So I know Kev's got plenty to say on that one. I'll just kind of stand by and stand back on this one and let Kev do what he needs to do. I know Kev's got he's going to have his game face on for that segment. So we'll just kind of leave that one for where it's at when we get to it. But that's pretty much the slate that we have for you guys. Let's not waste any more time. Let's dive into this Bears and Jets game. So kind of talked about it at the top. Jets had an impressive win over the Chicago Bears, winning by the score of 31-10. A 3-touchdown dub at home with a backup quarterback in Mike White. Pretty impressive. Now, granted, the Bears didn't have Justin Fields in this game, and you could definitely tell that offensively the Bears just weren't up to snuff today. It's Trevor Siemian. It's just, there's not a lot of hope with Trevor Siemian. I mean, Justin's one thing. Justin can at least keep that team viable because of extending plays with his feet and just the athleticism that he brings. But Trevor, not going to do much for you. But that's not really the story that we're going to go with here. Talking about Mike fucking White. And that's where this discussion needs to be had. So, Kevin, to kick this one to you, do you believe that Mike White should be the starting quarterback for the New York Jets for the rest of the year based on this dominant win over the Chicago Bears on Sunday?
How many times can somebody say yes consecutively? Like, yes, yes, yes. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, the proof is in the pudding. I understand, and I will preface 1,000%. This game could have 100% gone the other way if Justin Fields was there. So I'm not going to sit here and say that the Jets embarrassed the Bears. The Bears weren't at full strength. So let's put that to the side, and let's just talk about the focus on Mike White. I've been saying this kid has been good since last season. And the reason I say that is because the game that the Jets played the Colts, I believe it was a Thursday night game where it ended up being an absolute shootout by the score of like 45-30. We end up coming out on top. Jonathan Taylor breaks away for like a 60-some-odd yard touchdown to win the game or like seal the game. When the game had started, Mike White was in for about 2 games before that. He was in against Cincinnati, and I think that he was in against, I have it right here, against New England. He played solid in both of those games. And solid. Nothing fancy, nothing crazy. But the Bengals game last year, he threw for over 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. I was like, damn. Kid's kind of nice. Zach Wilson was injured. I figured at the end of the day it was just a replacement, maybe getting me Matt Flynn vibes, like, just getting overhyped. And then he goes to the Colts and he absolutely carves us up. Goes 7 of 11 in the first quarter, 95 yards and a touchdown with a freaking QBR of 93 and a passer rating of 122. He gets hurt. I don't know if it was a concussion. I think it was actually his opposite hand, his throwing hand, if I remember correctly. It was pretty swollen, and he wasn't able to go back. He wasn't able to grip the ball without pain. They try to tape him up and all this shit. Regardless, Josh Johnson comes in and he annihilates our defense. So I'm thinking anybody could have killed us that night. But I was thinking, with what I saw last season, I was like, this guy's kind of like, I think he's really good. Like, he was given a couple of opportunities. He goes out and he gets a win against the Bengals, obviously, last year, who ended up in the Super Bowl, 400 yards, 3 touch. That's hard to do. He was in New England. New England always plays really aggressive and tough. They end up losing that game 54-13, but he put up 200 yards. So I was like, it's the Patriots. It's a division opponent. The Jets haven't beat the Patriots in God knows how long. And he bounces back against Cincy, plays well against Indy in the time that he's there. And then you go to today, right? You skip to 2022. 315 yards, 3 touchdowns, 91 passer rating, 149.3 passer rating. Excuse me, 91.7 QBR, 149.3 passer rating. 6 incompletions. Zach Wilson had a total of like 9 completions last week for like 70-something yards. So, what are we talking about here? Like, Zach Wilson hasn't touched numbers like this in what I feel like his whole career. Number 2 overall pick, dog shit. I'm dying on this. Kyle and I have the proof and video evidence. When Zach was taken out of BYU, we said that was probably the worst decision that the Jets were going to make. Shit conference, no opponents, horrible first freshman and sophomore season, comes out as a junior. Had an okay year. The internet blows up on a pro day throw where he throws on the motion for like 70 yards with no defense. This kid's the next coming of Joe Namath. No, he sucks. His attitude, leadership, and now his confidence, talking about how the team has lost confidence in his ability to lead, and then he's lost confidence in himself. You're soft. Go cry to somebody who cares. You want to go sleep with people's moms? Go cry to one of those moms. Like, nobody has patience. You're in New York City, the New York media, the New York fan base, nobody gives a shit. You want to go and act like a spoiled brat and say that you're not the reason that you lost the week before. You're not saying that you feel bad for the deep, whatever. This is what happens when you act like a child. You get replaced by a backup who basically has nothing to lose and has outperformed you in multiple games. Limited basis, by the way. He's only played a total of 4 NFL games. In 4 games, he's looked better than you have in your whole career. Listen. Zach Wilson may have had some good games here and there. Zach Wilson may have had some flashes. I won't deny it. He hasn't been like an absolute bust. But I sent Kyle a graphic, and I can't remember when that was. I sent Kyle a tweet a couple of nights ago while I was on vacation, and I laughed because I was at the dinner table. And it was identical records in terms of like percentages, passing yards, touchdowns, and win-loss record to Jamarcus Russell, who is arguably the biggest bust in NFL history. Who was the number 1 overall pick? 2007 or 2008 to the Raiders, whichever one that was. Their numbers are almost symmetrical. It's crazy, right? It's like we haven't seen a bust that bad since. No. Zach Wilson is almost as bad. So, yes, Mike White is 100% going to carry this team because you already have a good offense. You have a good running attack. You have a good defense. You have good playmakers. You have a good coaching staff. You have a great leader in Robert Saleh. You were a quarterback away from competing in the AFC East, quarterback away from competing in the AFC in general. You're 7-4. You've beaten the Bills. This is possible. This is a team that can sneak into the playoffs, maybe get a wild card victory. Mike White gives you that ability. Accurate down the field, obviously is able to throw the long ball. He's able to be accurate. He's able to give this team something that Zach Wilson doesn't, which would seem to be everything in my opinion. But Mike White has proven enough. From last year to this year, it looks like he's only gotten better. Again, I understand the Fields wasn't there, but if we're basing it off of this game, as opposed to whatever Zach Wilson was putting onto the field the entire season, this game is enough for me to say, Zach, hold that clipboard, get comfortable, son. Don't even suit up. We don't need you.
Yeah, Kev, I'm with you 100% on this one. And, like I said, or actually what I should say is what you said is they were playing against the Bears. Not necessarily what I would consider top tier talent. So you kind of have to take this game with a little bit of a grain of salt, simply just because, had Mike White played against the Patriots last week, I'm not saying that he was going to play worse than Zach Wilson, but there's no guarantee that he would have played like spectacular football against the Patriots. But maybe he would have done enough to get them past New England, since New England only scored 10 points against the Jets last week. And that's how good that Jets defense is. And then, the Jets put on a very similar type of performance against the Bears this week. Kev, we were talking about it before we even started recording. The Jets needed a spark, especially at the quarterback spot, and I think that Mike White provides it. And, Kev just outlined all the stats. I mean, he had a fantastic day against the Bears, only had like 5 or 6 incompletions, just lit it up, and it didn't really matter who he was throwing to, whether it was Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore, Tyler Conklin. Like, all these guys were getting into the fold, and I will say that Mike White did an excellent job being able to distribute the ball effectively to not just 1 or 2 targets, but several targets, upwards of 5, 6, 7 receivers definitely got into the fold to make some sort of impact. And this is really where I kind of want to take the conversation to. If you put Mike White in this situation where he's able to succeed, and as long as the offensive line is giving him a clean pocket to throw to, Kev, I'm going to be kind of bold here. I think they have a very good chance to possibly even play for one of the top seeds, not only in the AFC East, but if they keep winning, and based off what this defense is doing, they could end up with like possibly the second or third best record in the AFC overall. Now, that would imply that Mike White keeps playing at a spectacular level, and there's no guarantee that he's going to be able to do that. I look at this defense as an elite defense just because of what they've been able to do the last couple of weeks, essentially limiting the last 2 opponents that they've gone up against to 13 points. That's impressive. Now, granted, you kind of have to take the opponents into account, and I'm fully aware of that. But I think based off of that loss against the Patriots last week, knowing that the defense played so well and the offense did absolutely nothing with Zach Wilson in the fold, and then you had all of the drama that came from that post-game press conference where Zach basically said that he wasn't responsible for them losing that game against New England, or specifically him, if you want to look at it that way. I'll tell you what, I think he lost the entire team based off that statement, because I think he just came off as somebody who was deflecting blame in that moment, and knowing, or I should say the team knew that they knew that the offense could have played better. And I think in this game particularly, now that you have a change at the quarterback position, Mike White dominated it, and I think really the team was looking forward to that change, and I think that they got it. And who knows? Could this be the spark that leads to a 3, 4, 5 game winning streaks? Who knows? Maybe. Obviously we have to see whether or not that Mike White can be able to sustain this level of success. And like I've already said, there's no guarantee that he's going to be able to do that. He's off to a good start. And as long as he doesn't turn the ball over and they get good complementary production from the run game, which was something that we should also talk about in the Bears game. They ran for over 150 yards, so they were able to effectively run the ball as well as passing the ball in the air. If they're able to do that, and you combine that with what the defense has been doing, this is a good team. This is not only just a good team in the AFC East, this is a good team in the AFC overall. We'll see how things transpire over the next couple of weeks. They've got some good opportunities to possibly shake things up as we go along into December and then early January. But I have to say, with Mike White getting his first start in 2022, definitely off to a good start, and we'll see whether or not that he can continue it. But I like where the Jets are right now. They're at 7-4. They're only 1 game behind the Bills and the Dolphins in the AFC East. We'll see what happens. They could potentially be in the driver's seat if they play their cards right. But, like I always say, time will tell.
I want to pivot this into a potential tangent alert, just letting the audience know ahead of time, right? I'm just giving a forewarning, extended media timeout, whatever you want to call it. This is why I personally have always been on that level of saying, just because you're a high draft pick or have a high contract or an expensive contract does not mean you're guaranteed shit in this league. I don't care if you're given 15 to 20 million dollars guaranteed, I don't care if you're the number one overall pick. If for whatever reason somebody is inserted into your position due to injury, due to an emergency, like God forbid, the passing of a family relative, and that player supersedes what you have done thus far up to that point in the season, I'm going to ride with that player because, like in the Jets case, Zach Wilson has been underperforming religiously. In the Jamarcus Russell case, he was underperforming on a regular basis, week in and week out, whether that was, underthrow, inaccurate passes, interceptions, turnovers, whatever the case may be. And if somebody comes in immediately, undrafted free agent, undrafted rookie, fourth round, fifth round pick, there are no guarantees that your job is safe. And that's why in the Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard case, Tony Pollard is completely outplaying Ezekiel Elliott. But everyone's like, well, financially, you can't afford to bench him, blah, blah, blah. But you can. It's about winning, right? You want to win a championship. You all talk about wanting to hoist a Lombardi trophy. You all talk about all the politics behind the NFL and all professional sports and, how you guys have to handle it week in and week out. Put your money where your mouth is. You overpaid a player that is not as good that you thought he was, or is not what he used to be because you gave him too long of a contract, or in this case, obviously you drafted somebody too high. Now you have to pay the piper. You wasted the draft pick, and now somebody else is performing better. You have to let that kid play. If you're winning, why would you change it? I don't understand. In the Cooper Rush and Dak Prescott thing, that's a little bit different. It's just because Dak was injured. The Cowboys were projected to be bad for the allotted time. It just so happens that Cooper Rush actually led them to an above 500 record. I'm just saying there are multiple cases in NFL and in sports history, should I say, where the second that person gets healthy, all of the momentum that that individual created for that team dissipates. It's not the same because the chemistry's thrown off, because that player brought a different kind of charisma, swag, confidence, whatever it is, and you replaced them because the person that you replaced was owed too much money or was drafted in the first round. I don't care. I've never cared. If Andrew Luck shit the bed, I'm just saying, if for whatever reason, number one overall pick, all the hype behind Peyton, and for whatever reason, Curtis Painter was balling out in preseason, Curtis Painter's balling out in practice, and Andrew had gotten hurt, which happened every fucking week for Colts fans that remember, and Curtis was balling out. I would say keep Curtis in. Let Andrew heal, whatever have you. Let's ride the wave while we have it. I'm just saying, just to put it into context about personal teams, because everybody always says, well, if it was your team, you wouldn't want. Shut up. You don't know me. But Kyle, I'm just asking you here, would you agree with that statement? Because everybody always says, oh, money, draft status, or he was taken at this position. Who cares?
I think, the way that I look at it, I mean, Kev, see that guy right there?
6th round draft pick, 199. I know.
You also remember the fact that Drew Bledsoe at the time was I think the first quarterback ever in NFL history to get $100 million contract. And New England gave him that contract. And guess what happened? Belichick saw what Tom was capable of. And I think Bill was kind of thinking long-term in that situation. And it's why am I going to pay an older quarterback over the course of the next 3 to 4 years for the rest of his contract when I've got a 6th round draft pick who is playing good enough to get wins for the team and somebody that we could develop over time to potentially become essentially a franchise quarterback? Bill decided to go with that. Even though at the time, a lot of people, if I was a little bit older, it would have probably included me as well, thinking that, once Drew would be healthy enough that he would have taken the job back from Tom. That wasn't the case. Belichick saw enough in Tom, had enough faith in him, and just decided to roll with him instead. And then Drew ends up going to Buffalo, and then pretty much kind of, I'm not going to say withers away, but it's just he never really became anything more after his Patriots tenure after that. So, yeah, I think there's multiple factors at play here. Obviously production is probably the biggest one. And then the second one is probably the contract. If the contract's too big and we got somebody who's getting overpaid compared to somebody who is not getting paid really anything compared to that person that's just getting paid top dollar, might as well cut bait with the guy that's making so much money that at least frees up cap space, and then we could use that leftover money to possibly bolster up some other parts of the team while we allow somebody who's maybe younger, getting paid less, give them a shot, give them a chance, and we'll kind of see where it goes. And as long as the coaching staff has faith in that guy that's going to replace a quarterback, in this case with Zach Wilson getting first round draft pick money, if the guy's not playing up to it, go with the backup. Go with the backup. If the backup's going to play better and he's cheaper, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially from a front office perspective. And like I said, production, I think, is obviously the biggest key factor. But if I had to say second, money does come into it. So I think you put those factors together. If Mike White's able to produce at this clip and at the contract that he's getting paid at, the Jets coaching staff's like, we may have to roll with this. And the front office is probably thinking the same thing. This could be one of those situations where I think the coaching staff and probably the front office, they see the writing on the wall with Zach Wilson. Homeboy's going to be holding the clipboard for probably the rest of the season if Mike White continues to play like this. So, and this is another thing that we kind of have to keep in mind. If Zach Wilson is going to potentially be holding a clipboard and we're not even through his second full season in the NFL, bro, his career might already be over. Like, done. As far as being a starter is concerned. Because unless there's some teams that are just absolutely desperate next year and they need a quarterback, maybe they could look to him. Or maybe the Jets just stash him as their backup and let Mike White just kind of roll it out from here. If Mike falters, then at least they have Zach to fall back to. But like I said, could we possibly be making a little bit too much based off of one game with Mike White? Yeah,
Probably.
maybe. We kind of have to see how this thing plays out first with him. And just because he had one good game, it doesn't mean he's going to pull off the next 4, 5, 6 games like Tom Brady or Peyton Manning back in the day. There's no guarantee about that. So,
No, not at all.
we'll see where it goes from here. There's a lot left to be determined with Mike White and the Jets, but I will say, I think that quarterback change was necessary. I think it's the spark that the Jets need as a whole. When you have that defense who's playing up to this level, bro, the Jets are a low-key scary team in the AFC. I'm not going to back off from that statement. They have a quarterback that can at least produce. It's a good formula to work with. It's just whether or not that they could be able to execute from here on out.
Yeah, no, for sure. But speaking of execution, one team, unfortunately, did not come away with a victory despite the execution of Tom Brady, and that's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Mhm.
So Tampa Bay falls to the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland by the score of 23-17. Tampa falls to 5-6, and Cleveland moves on to 4-7 right before the passing of the baton, where Deshaun Watson is supposedly going to be available for Week 13 next week. So Kyle, I'll kick this one to you. With Tom Brady basically giving it his all in a loss, where are the Bucs to go from here for the remainder of the year?
I still think they're probably going to win the NFC South. And it's simply just because every other team in the NFC South is a dumpster fire. Every team in that division is sub 500. And somebody has to be in first place, and it happens to be the Bucs because they have a 5-6 record. So that's where just things stand right now. And the Bucs, when I look at them, they're not a strong team. Defensively, they faltered in the fourth quarter again. You could even look back to a couple weeks ago when they played against the Seattle Seahawks in Munich. The Bucs were dominating that game by and large, and then in the fourth quarter, that Bucs defense kind of faltered, and the Seahawks made it a game at the end. They at least got it to a one-possession game when it was all said and done. And in a similar situation, the Bucs are up 17-10 in the fourth quarter, and the Bucs allow a game-tying drive defensively to Jacoby Brissett and the Browns to tie it to go to overtime, and then the Bucs need a stop at the end of overtime, and they can't get it. Amari Cooper burns by Carlton Davis on like a 45-yard play. I think they end up getting the tackle like the 2-yard line, and then a couple plays later, Nick Chubb runs it in for a touchdown, and the Browns win in overtime. And I got to give credit to the Browns. The Browns, they were resilient. There was a large stretch in this game where they couldn't get anything moving, and the Bucs defense was absolutely stifling. But I will say, I got to give the Browns just that resilience factor here, because they scored in the first drive of the game, and they essentially scored touchdowns in the last drives of the game. So they were able to put touchdowns on the board when they needed it, and The Bucks couldn't. And when I look at the Bucks specifically here, since that's the main point of focus here, this is a total team loss as far as I'm concerned. And as far as I'm concerned, no one is spared from blame here. I'll start with Brady. Brady could have been better. I understand statistically he was fine. The Bucks offense left too many plays out there on the field. Couldn't convert on third down. Brady did miss some passes. The offensive line missed some key blocks. The offensive line had some penalties that really cost them. Just by and large, Brady, he's the leader of that offense. And there are times where I've given him some slack based on how the offensive line has looked this year. But I got to blame him a little bit just because I thought that he could have played better despite how well he looked statistically. The offensive line, they had some key issues when it came to pass protection and just picking up stupid penalties, especially in overtime. There was a play in particular where Brady was able to convert on a third down conversion. Donovan Smith ends up getting hit with a illegal hands to the face penalty, puts him from a third and 4 that they actually converted on to a 3rd and 14. They couldn't convert it. The Browns get the ball back, and the Browns eventually get the game-winning touchdown. Like I kind of already mentioned with the defense, defensively, they looked great from essentially the second drive that the Browns had, basically until the end of the fourth quarter, because the Bucks were able to get consistent pressure all day. They sacked Jacoby Brissett 3-4 times in that game, and when they didn't sack him, they were at least getting pressure to force some errant passes. It's just when the Bucks needed to stop defensively, they just couldn't get it. And not only that, they allowed Nick Chubb to have a solid game on the ground. He had over 100 yards rushing and had the game-winning touchdown at the end of the day. And coaching-wise, I think they got too comfortable with relying on their defense to get them this win. I think they kind of took their foot off the pedal offensively. They played a very casual style of play offensively, mostly just running the ball and trying to use Brady to pass it on third down to convert it. And I think there should have been a little bit more risk taking, especially from the offensive coaching staff. I think that the play calling could have been a little bit more, not risky per se, but it's like you need to put a little bit of spark. You need to put a little bit of spice into your play calling, and that just did not happen. So when I look at this game in totality, the Bucks should have won this one. The Bucks were comfortably up the entire game. Granted, this was a low-scoring affair, and this was mostly a defensive battle. But being up 17-10 in the fourth quarter, and the Bucks don't put up any points, they got to play better than that. And look, I think I may be giving the Bucks a little bit too much credit overall this season. They're not that good of a team. They're a sub-500 team. The offense has been struggling the entire year, and they've had to rely on their defense to get it done. And in the last couple of games, they haven't been able to do it. So we'll see where it goes from here. I still think the Bucks are probably going to win the NFC South simply just because of how garbage the rest of the division is. But there's a very good chance that the Bucks could get in with a 9-8 record, 10-7 at best, and hell, maybe even a sub-500 record to go into the playoffs. This is not a good look for Tampa. This is a game that they should have won, and I think for me, it's back to the drawing board with them. They got a long way to go as far as I'm concerned to become any sort of NFC contender. This was a game that they screwed the pooch on. They screwed it up, and we'll see where they go from here. But Kev, the floor is yours from here on out.
I mean, I don't really have too much on this one to kind of just follow up to what you had said. I mean, the Browns ran the ball for almost 200 yards. That we're talking about 5.6 yards per carry. They ran for 189 yards, so 11 off of 200. Jacoby Brissett played a solid game. Nothing fancy, but in terms of clean football, other than the Hail Mary to go into halftime, there were no turnovers in this game. And I, again, consider to me not to be a turnover. It was like 4 seconds. You heave it into the end zone. On a whim, you get a touchdown. At worst, you get an interception that ends the half. It's not that big of a deal. Didn't really hurt the team or help it. So, again, I know that on the stat sheet it comes up as an interception, but there were no fumbles outside of that pick. So, to me, this was a flawless game in terms of keeping the ball away from the other team. And then, of course, you go and you look at Tampa. They were able to run it for a little bit more consistent, a little bit more on a consistent basis than they have all year. And of course, Leonard Fournette was not available for this game, but they did run the ball for 4 yards shy of 100 at 96 yards for 4.8 a carry. So nothing crazy, but again, better than they have all season, in my personal opinion. So it showed that they have some life on the ground. But again, you put too much pressure on Tom Brady to have to get you out of situations, to get you ahead in certain situations, and to come back from behind in almost every situation, with the offensive line still being inconsistent in certain phases. So you combine that with the defense allowing what they had in the fourth quarter in this game, and then of course allowing that touchdown in overtime. So it's just a matter of the defense kind of takes naps, kind of takes possessions or series off. And it always just happens to be late in game this season for them. So that's one thing they're going to have to turn around and take a look at and say, with Todd Bowles being a defensive minded head coach, it's kind of surprising for me, especially knowing his background. But at the end of the day, what are you supposed to do here? So the Bucks definitely have a lot to work on. But I mean, to Kyle's point, this is probably going to be an under, if not, no, actually, there aren't, and not an even amount of games this year going forward. So this is probably going to be a sub 500 team going into the playoffs, like similar to when Seattle was 7-9 and won the NFC West about 10, 15 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, whenever that was, with the whole beast mode against the Saints thing. But for the sake of the segment, both teams aren't exactly anything flashy. Again, I agree with Kyle. I think the Bucks should have had this one with them leading for the majority of this game, but here we are yet again, another week, another hard, annoying, and confusing loss for the Buccaneers, but they'll still make the playoffs. I mean, Atlanta's horrible. Obviously, New Orleans is New Orleans, and then you go into to Carolina. I think they're confused on whether or not they want to tank or not because they just won today too, and that was just absolutely weird. That Carolina is 4-7, and we were just talking about them being a lottery team in terms of having a top five, potentially a top 1 to top 3 pick. And you're like, but why are you winning football games? You fire your head coach, you trade some of your best players away, you're having all these quarterback issues. It's like the writing was on the wall, but you're not doing what you need to do to tank. So it's like Carolina confuses the shit out of me week in and week out, but that's neither here nor there. So yeah, Tom falls to sub 500 again, and we'll see what happens with the Browns for the rest of the season. In my personal opinion, I think that the year is chalked for them in terms of making the playoffs. I know that technically they're still in the hunt statistically, but they would need a lot of things to happen. A lot of teams would need to lose. They need to win out. But let's see what Deshaun can bring to the table next week, and see if that's going to be a glimpse into what he can do for them moving forward in 2023.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what sort of change that Deshaun's going to bring to the offense. Look, I mean, when it came to Jacoby's been a decent backup in the NFL. He's definitely had some flashes and made some sort of impact here and there, but nothing like where he's going to really turn the tide for a team. It's more of just kind of filling in for somebody until they get back. But when I look at what Deshaun Watson brings, Kev, it's been a while since we've seen him hit an NFL field. And
2 years, basically.
Hopefully he hits the field and he hits the ground running, and it's just like the Deshaun Watson of old. But it's going to be interesting just to see the whole dynamic of the offense change. Because, I mean, when I looked at this year specifically with the Browns, it's really been Nick Chubb who has just been dominating the offense for them. I mean, he's consistently getting 20 to 25 carries a game. And I think there was an actual stat that I saw today from the Browns. Whenever Nick Chubb gets 20 carries or more, the Browns are undefeated. And this was a game where it was actually at risk until about 30 seconds left in the fourth quarter because Nick Chubb had around 20 carries before going into overtime. And had they not gotten that touchdown with about 30 seconds left, would have been probably the first time that they've lost with Nick Chubb getting 20 plus carries. So obviously I know a lot of people are going to be focusing on Deshaun, and Deshaun is definitely going to be a huge factor here for the Browns moving forward. But I still think that team is going to be incredibly reliant on Nick Chubb. And dude, he's a beast.
You live and die by Nick Chubb in Cleveland. There's no doubt about that.
He's an extremely patient back, allows the offensive lineman to make the blocks, to be able to hit the holes. And when you got Kareem Hunt as your backup running back, bro, that's a deadly combo back there.
That's a 1-2 punch, man.
I'm just telling you, you put Deshaun Watson with that type of weaponry, you got Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, David Njoku. Like, they don't have scrubs out there in Cleveland.
Not at all.
Like, I'm telling you, like, I'm not thinking really anything big with the Browns for the rest of this year. I mean, if they go on a heater, maybe they might make a show of it towards the end of the year. But I think at this point, I think the hole's too deep for them to get out of at this point. True. I think looking into next year, though, that's where there's going to be, I think, a lot more potential for the Browns as a whole. And maybe Deshaun can kind of give us a glimpse or like a sneak preview of what we're going to get next year with him, since he is going to be their main quarterback to roll with for what, the next four
Was it
years at
five
least.
years?
He
4 or
signed a
5 years,
he
yeah.
signed a 5-year deal. This was the first one.
But
Obviously,
that was an extension as to the deal that he had left with Houston as well. So I don't know if
I don't know how much was
there
left
was
on that.
time left.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think there was
remember.
like I think there was like 2 years left on that. So he may be there for 5 years. It could be four. I don't know the stipulations to it, but he'll be there for a little bit.
But I'll just round it out with this. It's just going to be very interesting to see how the rest of the year plays out, and we'll kind of see where the Browns are to go from here based on the last 5 or 6 weeks of the year. Because if they really go on a heater, could they sneak into a playoff? They'd have to have a lot happen for them to get to that point. But at least it would give us something to work with them going into next year, though. Because to be frank, if they really go on a streak here and they fall just short, you got to watch out for the Browns next year. The Browns could really make some moves if Deshaun's at that level. But he could be rusty. And I think he will be a little bit rusty going into this year, but we'll see. So it'll be interesting to see when he hits the field. But after this, we're going to kick it out to a West Coast game that featured the Las Vegas Raiders and the Seattle Seahawks. This game was an absolute track meet. Kevin, get this one to me. I got a lot to say about this one.
Yeah. I mean, let's just be blunt. This was a runaway by the its sense of the word, just for the sake of Josh Jacobs having over 300 all-purpose yards. The Raiders win by the score of 40-34 in overtime, and that was again enhanced to Josh Jacobs breaking away for an 86-yard touchdown to win the game. And both quarterbacks played decent, but overall this was a shootout, and this was kind of a disappointing loss for the Seahawks. It was just a big letdown for Kyle and myself, who thought that this was definitely going to be a game for them to get back on track. So, Kyle, I'm going to pose this one to you, but a little bit more in the sense of, is Seattle revealing their true colors? Is this Seattle falling apart at the seams while San Francisco wakes up on the other end in the NFC West?
I think Seattle really screwed up a big opportunity here. And Kev, it's been fair to say that we've been extremely impressed by what the Seahawks been able to do this year. I mean, the fact that they were at the top of the NFC West 10, 11 weeks into the season was something that nobody expected. But this was a game they had to win just to basically keep at pace with the 49ers. And we did an analysis a couple days ago where we were talking about the Seahawks going up against the Raiders here. And I was in the mindset that the Seahawks had the requisite pieces to be able to beat the Raiders. And unfortunately, that just didn't happen. And the biggest takeaway from this one was that the defense just outright failed. They gave up 40 points to the Las Vegas Raiders, who coming into this game had only won 3 games and had been one of the most underwhelming teams, not only in the AFC West, not only in the AFC, but in the NFL to the largest extent possible. And going into this game, I was in the mindset that the Seahawks could have won this game and then potentially the next 2 games, where it would set up a huge matchup between themselves and the 49ers to really dictate who's going to win the NFC West. Because the Seahawks and the 49ers already played each other once this year. The 49ers won it very convincingly. And I was in the mindset, had the Seahawks been going on a 2-3 game win streak into that 49ers matchup that's going to take place in a couple weeks from now, the Seahawks would be essentially in that equation to possibly win the NFC West. I think at this point, I think they're screwed. I don't know if they're going to be able to try to get back at the top of the NFC West here, simply just because the 49ers are still winning football games and they've been largely successful the last couple weeks. And it's not really an indictment on the offense here. I thought that Geno Smith played very effectively. He only had 10 incompletions. He threw for over 300 yards, had 2 touchdowns, didn't turn the ball over. Offensively, they were still able to put up points. They put up 34 on the Raiders, which was kind of something I was expecting. I was expecting the Seahawks to be able to put up points here. But it was their defense. Their defense let them down tremendously in this game. And, despite the fact that the Raiders have been struggling the entire year, they put one of their best performances that they've had offensively the entire year. This was probably their best offensive performance that they've had all year. And the Seahawks had no answer for Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs had probably the best single game that we've seen from one of the running back spots that we've seen the entire year. Just because he ran for 230 yards on the ground. And not only that, he was the team's leader in receiving yards. So he had over 300 all purpose yards in this game, which is something that we have not seen in quite some time. So, and Josh Jacobs was coming into this game questionable. So there was possibly an off chance that he could have missed this game. But once he hit the field, man, he did not look back whatsoever and took full advantage of what the Seahawks defense was giving him because he just ran all over that Seahawks defense. He had 33 carries in this game. So he absolutely dominated this game. If you had him in fantasy, good on you. That was a good move. And hopefully you started him and hopefully you didn't have him on your bench because he got you some points for sure. But overall, I think maybe this magical ride for the Seahawks this year is starting to kind of wither here. Obviously, I still think they have some winnable games in the next couple of weeks before they lead up to this 49ers matchup in a couple of weeks. But yeah, this was a game that they should have won. Like I said, the Raiders had been a pretty subpar team this year to begin with. And the fact that you were at home, the last game that you had was against the Bucs. Granted, you lost in a close one, but this was a game that they needed to get. And we'll see whether or not that they could bounce back. But at a 6-5 record with the 49ers advancing, they got some work to do as far as the Seahawks are concerned. This is a game that they frankly screwed up. So, Kev, the floor is yours.
I mean, I'd say definitely in terms of like a panic meter for Seattle with them losing back-to-back games and San Fran taking the lead, I would say it's probably about a 5 or a 6. I know that we still have a decent amount of time left in the regular season, but the defense just doesn't look good for Seattle as of late. I mean, allowing some late game heroics in back-to-back weeks just shows that either A, the defense has been on the field too long, B, the offense is not able to convert to extend drives and put points on the board in the second half, or just quite frankly, C, they're just failing to execute because obviously you have Tom Brady going down the field just a few weeks ago in where was it? Germany, right? Munich?
Yeah, it was in Munich.
So, you have that game, the way that ends, and then you obviously have this game coming up, and you're just like, what is happening right now? Like, are the Seahawks falling apart? I can't blame Geno. I mean, 10 incompletions, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. I mean, the guy is still throwing for over 100 yards and 106 passer rating. But this is going to be the difference for me. Aside from the defense, Seattle has always been a very well-balanced offensive team. The running game only had 65 yards total on the ground, 2.8 yards per carry in the entire game. I mean, Kenneth Walker had 2 touchdowns, but 14 carries for 26 yards, 1.9 per carry. It just looked like the Seahawks were never really able to get into a rhythm in terms of putting yards on the ground on a consistent basis. Now, you go and you flip it to the other side. When Jacobs gets his touches for the Raiders, he's been known to get over 100 yards on a regular basis in terms of just rushing yards, let alone total yards from scrimmage. Then you go and you let him go for 229 on the ground, 74 in the air, and 2 touchdowns, the game-winning one in overtime where he breaks away for 86 yards. The Seahawks defense just looked like an absolute joke. And what's crazy is they actually were able to force 2 turnovers against Derek Carr. He had 2 interceptions. The Raiders have not been a good football team all year. The Raiders have been arguably one of the funniest, most laughing-stock teams all season, despite the acquisition of Davante Adams, who, by the way, I know he had 74 yards, but it's like, we're going to need some Davante Adams numbers here. We're going to need like 150 yards, a touchdown or 2, something, because what you're producing right now is just not enough. There have been rumors circulating that Derek Carr is going to want out at the end of the season. They're going to try to dump him somewhere. And if he leaves, then Davante Adams will stay. But they're best friends. So, like, the rumors are just kind of circling all around Vegas. Obviously, the issues with Josh McDaniels, the front office saying that his job is safe. All this nonsense, right? But then they go and they pull off a win like this against a good opponent in Seattle. In Seattle, mind you. So I'm just going to kind of end this here. We know that the Raiders aren't exactly a good football team, but this could be a game that wakes them up because we all know they have the talent on paper. And then for the Seahawks, 2 in a row, San Fran 7-4, they're catching fire. Like Kyle said, this has got to be the wake-up call to say we need to get it together or we're going to lose sight of this division that we just had for like a month and a half it's going to be gone in the blink of an eye. Russell Wilson struggling in Denver, that doesn't mean you guys get to fall apart just because you have 6 wins. Pete Carroll's got to get these boys rallied together. They got to get the running game back in shape, and that defense has got to find a way to keep teams under 24, 21 points, because allowing 40 points to the Raiders, it's just not a good look.
No, and look, when it comes to the 49ers, they didn't really have what I would consider the greatest offensive performance against the Saints. They only scored 13 points. Now, granted, it was a shutout. I think it's the first time that the Saints have been shut out in like 20 years. It's been a long time since the Saints have been shut out. It's something ridiculous. But, I mean, at this point, I was even discussing about it over the weekend. I still think the 49ers from top to bottom are the better team. I mean, offensively, they don't look like it at times, but they could put up 25, 30 points if Jimmy G's on some sort of wheeling and dealing type thing, especially with Christian McCaffrey in the backfield. Like, that team has an explosive element to it if they're able to just execute. And the same thing could be said with the Seahawks. The Seahawks have that element, but they did put up 34 points. They didn't lose because of the offense. They lost because Vegas dominated at the time of possession, and Seattle couldn't stop the run. And that, to me, is the biggest difference between Seattle and San Francisco, is that San Francisco's defense is elite. There have been times where they have faltered. I will give them that, but not to the degree of what the Seahawks have faltered to in some of these games. And look, Kev, we've already kind of hit the nail on the head here. This is a game that they needed to win to at least keep pace with the 49ers. And the fact that they lost to a 3-team win before this game actually took place in the Raiders.
Not a good look.
That's not a good look. And you gave up 40 points? 40? 40 is not a good look. I mean, the Raiders have struggled this year. Granted, they've lost some heartbreakers. They've lost some pretty close
They're
games.
pretty close. All games that they've played for the most part have been like within single digits, almost every single one.
But it's like, Seattle's at home. And if I remember correctly, I think they were coming off of a bye.
Yep.
Into this game. So, yeah, they screwed this one up. And I think at this point, if the 49ers keep playing the way that they're playing, I think Seattle's going to be looking on the outside in for that top spot in the NFC West. Now,
Facts.
when it comes to the playoffs, we'll kind of see if they can find their way into some sort of playoff, some sort of wild card spot. Time will tell on that, but they can't lose a couple games in a row here. There are some winnable games for them over the next couple of weeks before they play the 49ers. So they definitely need to get something kick-started to at least have some sort of momentum going into that 49ers game. But we'll leave that game for where it is. We'll focus on a surging team that's coming out of the NFC East right now, and that is the Washington Commanders. So the Washington Commanders had a very close win at home against the Atlanta Falcons, beating them by the score of 19-13. The Commanders for the last month or so have been one of the better teams that we've seen, not just in the NFC East, but really the NFL to a larger extent. With Taylor Heineke at the quarterback position, granted, I wouldn't say he has the biggest statistical numbers to work with here, but he finds ways to keep the Commanders in the win column. And as far as I see it, that's the most important thing at this point. They're sitting at a 7-5 record. They're 2 games over 500. And it really just kind of goes to show how competitive this NFC East division is this year, as it is the most competitive division in football right now, which definitely says something compared to what we anticipated this division being before the season that it started. So, Kevin DeCate, this one to you. With the Commanders' recent success with Taylor Heineke at the helm, where do you think this team could go from here now that they're sitting at a 7-5 record in the NFC East?
Dude, it's weird because they've won 6 of the last 7. Taylor Heineke, like Kyle just said, is not the quarterback that's going to go out there and win you a game with 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, whatever the case may be. But he's someone that can get you the key first downs, limit the turnovers, rally the team, and just be an overall good teammate. Sometimes that's what you need, and we've talked about this multiple times on the show, where people are misconstrued, like quarterbacks got to go out there and put up 450, 500 yards like a Patrick Mahomes on a week in and week out basis. This is a team sport, and the Commanders did what they needed to do to minimize Atlanta's offense. They held them to 13 points. Now, that goes to say that, Washington wasn't much better considering they only had 19, but that was enough to win. Not all wins are going to be pretty. Not all wins are going to be blowouts or fancy, but When Taylor Heineke goes for 138, 2 touchdowns, he did have an interception, but no sacks and no fumbles. So you limit to 1 turnover the entire game. He had a good passer rating, 88.7, nothing too flashy. But I mean, again, he doesn't need to go out there and carve up the box score for me. He doesn't need to go out there and absolutely throw a perfect game going 23 for 23. He needs to do enough to move the chains, keep the ball away from the other team, and not hinder his ability to win in terms of keeping the team from winning. And that's what they're doing. That's the key phrase. It is just like we said in the Jets segment. This is a guy that's coming out of left field that has been a career backup that was basically out of the league a few years ago, and now he's starting for the Washington Commanders in terms of this push for a playoff berth. Because as of right now, the way that it ended tonight after the Eagles game, everybody that is in a wild card spot is in the NFC East. The Cowboys, the Giants, and the Commanders are the 3 wild card teams in the NFC if it were to end today. Absolutely insane. We'll talk about that another day because that's another segment in and of itself. We've talked about the NFC East a multitude of times, but this is just going to show, wow, the Commanders aren't a joke. They don't even have Chase Young back, and this defense has found a way to turn this completely around. Ron Rivera was on the hot seat as the year started to move forward, and like I said, 6 of 7. It speaks volume. Carson Wentz was supposedly brought in here to add a different spark to this offense, hopefully a quarterback for the future, similar to what he was hoped to be for the Colts, and he gets replaced by Taylor Heineke, who played okay football last year. But I mean, when you're just going out there and you're putting up 176 yards on the ground, when you're going out there and you're sacking Marcus Mariota, well, never mind, sacked one time. He was pressured a decent amount, but in terms of finding ways to turn the ball over, they did get an interception on Mariota as well. But the Commanders' rush defense was a little suspect. They gave up 167 on the ground, almost 6 yards per carry to the Falcons. I mean, Tyler Algier had 54, Cordero Patterson had 52. Mariota had 49 himself. I mean, that just goes to show, like, they were kind of, excuse my French, like Zeke would say, everybody was eating at their own freaking pace. So it's not like the Commanders were able to really slow much down other than Marcus Mariota in the air. But again, they did what they needed to do. They capitalized. It wasn't flashy, but all that matters is they got that W at the end of the day. And at 7-5, compared to what they were just a month ago, I'd say that the Commanders are in a pretty good place right now to compete at least for a playoff berth because Taylor Heineke has completely shifted the morale in that Commanders locker room.
Yeah, Kev, I'm kind of in a similar sentiment with you. It's just been kind of surprising just to see how good the NFC East this year is as a whole, based on what it was looking, based off of what it was looking like going into the season, because we did not really have that high hopes for the division, and yet it's by far the most competitive division that we've seen in the NFL this year. And when it comes to the Commanders' effectiveness in these wins that they've been able to pick up, I would say that by and large, it's really been a well-balanced effort where the offense is doing enough to limit turnovers, be able to just get consistent enough drives to be able to get points on the board as far as field goals are concerned, and then potentially getting touchdowns, whether it comes in the form of Taylor Heineke passing the ball or getting production on the ground game. And we have seen Brian Robinson in particular really kind of step up in these big pivotal games that they've needed to win the last couple of weeks to be able to at least give them a decent look at the ground game. And like I said, this is a well-balanced team here, just because I don't think that like one component of the offense overtakes another, and the defense has really been playing solid the last month or so. And I think really the biggest question from here on out is whether or not they could be able to maintain it. And I'm looking at their schedule right now. Their next 2 games are against the Giants. They play against the Giants next on December 4th. Then they have a bye week, and then they play the Giants on the 18th. So they play them in back-to-back games. Then they got a real test. They got to play the 49ers on the road on Christmas Eve. That's going to be a tricky one for them. And I'm not so sure that they're going to be able to pull that one out. The only way they'd be able to win that game is if they were able to stifle that Jimmy G-led offense. Not only that, you got Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle. I mean, they've got some decent weapons out there in San Fran, and there's no guarantee that Washington's going to be able to play up to snuff against that offense. Then they have a pretty winnable game against the Browns at home on New Year's Day, and then they finish it out with the Cowboys. So there are some winnable games here. These next two games against the Giants, these are winnable games simply just because the amount of injuries that the Giants have sustained this year is just absolutely crippling for them. And the Commanders, we'll see whether or not they could integrate Chase Young back into the fold. There was a chance that he could have played in this game against the Falcons. If he's able to come back and provide a spark for that defense, this defense could even play at a higher level than what they've been playing at really the last probably 3-4 weeks. And who knows? I think that their chances of making the playoffs are still open, but they can't drop games that they should win. And as long as they're competitive in games that they're underdogs in, at least it'll have a good look for them, even if they come out on the losing side. And who knows? Maybe they can get a surprise win against the 49ers, or maybe a win against the Cowboys. It could be a situation where the Commanders could be fighting for one of those last wild card spots in the NFC playoff picture. But I think as of right now, I wouldn't say that the Commanders are this team that everybody should be fearful of. This is a dark horse Super Bowl team. I don't envision that with the Commanders. They just simply do not have the offensive firepower to be able to go up against teams like the Eagles or the Vikings or the 49ers. I threw the 49ers in there simply just because I think that they have that capability at times. But maybe they could play spoiler if they were to get into the playoffs. Maybe they could win one of those wild card games and actually get into a divisional round game. I still think that Taylor Heinicke has provided them a decent service for them, and he's done more good for them than harm. I think at this point, though, it's whether or not that they could be able to take that offense to another level, another step higher, to possibly compete against those top tier teams in the NFC. But I just haven't seen enough from them yet. But as of right now, they've been very solid. 7-5 record is nothing to joke at. It could be a lot worse. And overall, you could say that Taylor Heinicke maybe saved Ron Rivera's job, like Kevin said. Rivera's job was potentially on the hot seat about a month and a half ago. The Commanders were not in a good place at that point in time, but they have completely flipped the narrative, and I think it's really been based off of what Taylor Heinicke's done, Brian Robinson's done out of the backfield, and the defense really playing up to snuff. So overall, Commanders are in a good spot here, but there's still work to be done as far as I see it.
Yeah, this definitely is not something that is going to be rolled over in terms of, oh wow, here they are. This is what it's going to be for the rest of the season. You have to remember he's still a backup. You have to remember that
Yeah.
they're still getting to know one another in terms of their chemistry and their team morale. Just because a backup is able to spark something for a month doesn't mean that that's going to last the rest of the year. So I will say that it is a team to monitor for sure going into the playoffs. But we've seen it 100 times. A random team makes it into the playoffs by the skin of their teeth, and a team plays down to them, or doesn't expect them to play hard, or for whatever reason they just shit the bed against a bad opponent, and they come out with an upset. I mean, that's what the playoffs are for. You win or you go home. And I'm not saying that the Commanders are going to make it. I'm not saying that they're going to upset anybody important, but they showed grit enough to go into a Monday Night Football game 2 weeks ago against an undefeated division rival, and they mopped the floor with them. It's not like they didn't have opportunities to lose the game, but they did capitalize on a lot of opportunities that Philly gave them. So I will say again, this is a team to just be aware of. But like Kyle said, the schedule for the next month is going to be not necessarily a gauntlet, but it's going to be a consistent test week in and week out for Taylor Heinicke to overcome adversity yet again.
Yeah, I mean, 3 out of their last 5 games are divisional games, and those games are always tough. Even though the Giants have been battered and bruised this year, there's no guarantee that the Commanders are going to walk in and win both of those games. Because that Giants defense, I mean, give them credit. That Giants defense has been able to play up to snuff, even despite the fact that Daniel Jones and that offense have been sporadic at times. So maybe the Giants split one of those games between the Commanders, and the Commanders may need to get a win against the Cowboys or the 49ers. I don't really foresee that happening. But I'm not going to hate on them to the point where I don't think that they're going to make the playoffs. I think they have a good enough record to possibly get in. They just can't lose 4 out of their last 5 games. If they split, let's say this way, if they win 3 out of their next 5 games, let's say they beat the Giants twice and they beat the Browns and they lose to the 49ers and the Cowboys, that's a playoff team. They're a playoff team.
10-7.
10-7 is a good record to go out on based off of all the circumstances that they've had at the quarterback spot this year, all the potential issues when it came to Ron Rivera's coaching duties. But I think if they could make it into the playoffs, and based on who they would play, I don't know who they would play, who would be like the number 2 seed. It might be the Vikings, it might be the Cowboys. I mean, I don't know at this point, but all in all, definitely a team that's been on the rise though, and definitely a team that should not be slept on in any way, shape, or form. They've been playing pretty solid the last couple of weeks.
Got
But
to give them their credit, you know.
yeah,
And similar to the Commanders, another team has been given credit that was slept on early on in the year, rightfully so because of the performance of the offensive line. But the Cincinnati Bengals go on the road and upset, thankfully, the Tennessee Titans in Tennessee by the score of 20-16. Jamar Chase was not playing, neither was Joe Mixon, and yet the Bengals were able to come out on top with a close victory. And I'm looking here just quickly at the box score. It wasn't anything absolutely incredible or super flashy, but I mean, Derrick Henry was held under 50 yards. Ryan Tannehill almost had 300 yards passing. So this seemed to be a very good back and forth game. I was unable to see it. So Kyle, I'm swinging this your way. With Joe Burrow now moving into 7-4, tied with the Baltimore Ravens, even though the Ravens have the advantage because of their previous matchup that they had a few weeks ago. How do you feel about the Bengals turning their season around to be able to compete in the AFC?
well, I think it was about time. Obviously, they had a pretty poor start at the beginning of the year. A lot of it was predicated on the fact that the offensive line couldn't protect Joe Burrow in any way, shape, or form. And yet, despite that, and not only that, they lost Jamar Chase a couple of weeks ago due to a hip injury. They've been able to really come back full circle and start at a 7-4 record, basically when we go into December, which I think at this point is basically kind of a record that we kind of expected them to be at this point. So you got to give a lot of credit to Joe Burrow and just the overall team being able to weather the storm at the beginning of the year and get these really crucial wins to put them in this position. Now, when I look at the Bengals right now, 7-4, they're tied with the Ravens. The Ravens own the tiebreaker simply just off of the one matchup that they've had. It's going to put a lot of emphasis on that next matchup that's going to take place between the Bengals and the Ravens, because I think whoever wins that game, it's going to dictate who probably wins the division as a whole, unless the team that wins that game just absolutely falls apart at the end of the year. But I like the fact that the Bengals won this game not off the back of Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow did enough to win them this game, but this was a defensive win for them. The fact that they were able to maintain Derrick Henry to a pedestrian day at running the football was pivotal. I was in the mindset if they held him to 75 yards rushing or even 100 yards rushing, that they would take that as a win simply just based off of what Derrick Henry could do when he gets 25, 30 touches. The fact that he was only held to 35 yards rushing or under 40 yards, that's something that you could walk away from. That's a huge benefit for them. And I think going into this game, one of the things I had mentioned, if you get into a situation where you have Joe Burrow going up against Ryan Tannehill, who do you think is going to make the play that needs to be made to win the game? I think Joe Burrow was that guy over Ryan Tannehill. And that's kind of what happened in this game. Joe Burrow made the plays that needed to be made. Ryan Tannehill made some plays here and there, but just not enough to get over the hump against Cincinnati. And as far as I see it, Cincinnati needed this win just to keep at pace with the Ravens. And as we go into the month of December, I think the Bengals are in a real good spot here. Jamar Chase was questionable coming into this game. The Bengals decided to sideline him for another week to just kind of rest up and get ready for this upcoming Chiefs game, which is absolutely critical for them. And they're going to need to be at full strength going into that game. So, if they're able to bring back Jamar Chase into the fold to round out that offensive unit, those guys are going to be ready to go against the best team in the NFL at this point in the Kansas City Chiefs. So when it comes to the Bengals look like they have their pieces ready to go going into the month of December. And that's absolutely crucial as far as I see it. It puts them in the driver's seat of their own destiny. And when it comes to that upcoming Ravens matchup to really dictate the division, they got to be on their A game, because if they win that game against the Ravens, I think that they could walk away being AFC North Division champs when it's all said and done. but this was an absolutely crucial road win for them. The Titans are no team to slack on here. The Titans have been one of the better teams defensively this year, simply just because when you've looked at the Titans defensively, the last time they gave up 20 points was against the Las Vegas Raiders, and that was back in September. So it's been a long time since the Titans have given up 20 points to a defense. And against an offense. So overall, the Bengals were able to do enough. They got this win in Nashville, and we'll see whether or not that they could be able to maintain this winning success moving forward. But the biggest thing to me is they're getting Ja'Marr Chase back in the fold potentially next week, and I think it's going to be absolutely huge because that chemistry that Joe Burrow and Ja'Marr have, it's one of the best quarterback wide receiver duos that we'll see in the NFL. And if they have those guys ready to go against Kansas City, that's going to be a hell of a matchup when it takes place next week. So, as far as I see it, the Bengals are definitely in control of their own destiny, but they got to take advantage of these next couple of games that they have on their slate if they're going to try to win the AFC North. So, Kev, the floor is yours.
Man, it's like I said, when my boy Joseph gets it going. He's an unstoppable force, man. People sleep on the guy after a Super Bowl appearance last year. Obviously, they start off slow and they find a way to get it together as they start to get healthy. Obviously, Ja'Marr Chase gets injured, but they have been able to weather the storm since he's been hurt. You go on a 3-game win streak against the Panthers, Steelers, and Titans. 2 of those games were against poor opponents in terms of record, so that was expected. But then you go and you play an AFC potential juggernaut in terms of leading the AFC South, someone you faced in the playoffs last year, someone you're familiar with, and their one-trick pony, which is Derrick Henry. You not only cap, or should I say bottle up Derrick Henry, you basically make him null and void in terms of what he was able to do on the ground. 38 yards rushing is absolutely incredible for an opposing defense to stand there and say, we kept that guy, that animal, under 50 yards. And the only team that was able to do that was Buffalo in week 2 of the season. So the Bengals need to hold their heads up high to say that we may not have scored a lot, we may not have capitalized on some points left on the board, but we were able to keep their best asset, their best weapon, their best player under a minuscule of yards in terms of totality on the ground. Now, he did have 70 some odd yards in the air based on 169-yard pass, but in terms of overall, I'll allow that one pass as opposed to him going off for 200 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns. So let them have what they had, but Ryan Tannehill did perform well, 291 yards. So it's not like they went out there and kind of choked. It was just a matter of who was going to be able to want it more, who was going to be able to push more. And even without Joe Mixon, the Bengals were able to run for over 100 yards as a team. So T. Higgins did what he needed to do. Hayden Hurst did what he needed to do. And, the Titans go back to the drawing board and say, well, you know what? We got to play better. We can't just rely on Derrick Henry. But we all know that that's what Mike Vrabel does. It's literally lean on Derrick Henry, 25 to 30 attempts a game. And that's going to be the play action for Ryan Tannehill, whether that's with Austin Hooper, Treylon Burks, and so on and so forth. They have okay weapons. I would say that they're a little bit underwhelming, at least in my personal opinion, because one of them is a rookie. So I will say that outside of Derrick Henry, they do lack depth. So the Titans go back and they say, you know what? This was a close one. We can improve. We can get better. They're going to win the South. I don't see anybody coming out of the AFC South, especially with our division being absolute dog shit. And then you look at the Bengals. They're already the best. They are already tied with the Ravens for the division. And when that game comes to pass, that is going to be an absolute must-watch television event. And once again, Kyle, this freaking game next week is a 4:25 game. It's not a Sunday night game. It's not a Monday night game. It is a midday Sunday game. And Kyle, man, we keep talking about this all year. If you're gonna flex certain games, you got to look at the and circle like, yo, this game is gonna be lit. But here we are, and it's gonna be a 4:25 game. But yeah, kudos to the Bengals, man. I knew they'd find a way to turn around. I knew they'd get it together. I mean, Burrow was sacked 1 time. That's a lot less than average over the last couple of years. So I will say that they've gotten better and they've gotten it together. But yeah, the Bengals and Chiefs game next week, it's going to be a good one.
Look, I mean, Kev, granted, I know it's not a Sunday night game, but it's like you're going to have probably Jim Nantz and Tony Romo on the call. I don't think that's necessarily the worst thing in the world.
No, but it's you know what I'm saying. It's not a game you want to be in the middle. You want that to be, all right, the day's over, relax, have some dinner, watch a good football game. Like I don't want to wait. You know, I just personally, I don't. Hold on a second before I ramble further.
Yeah,
I want to
let's
see.
see.
I want to see who's the Sunday night game.
You're gonna be shocked when you see it.
Hold on, because now my computer's sitting here doing the circle of death that it's loading for an eternity.
You're gonna hate this one.
Sunday,
You're gonna hate this one.
Sunday.
Week 13. Told you were gonna hate this one, bro.
Bro, the two under 500 teams in the NFC South. Bro, can we flex this, please? Like,
You're looking at the wrong one.
week 13, Sunday, 8:15. No, that's ESPN. So I don't have a Sunday night game on my computer.
Yeah, look hard enough.
Is it
looking
me?
hard. You're not looking
Is it
hard
us?
enough. No, I have it
It
right in
is
front
us. It is us. It is
Yeah.
us. We're playing the fucking Cowboys. I don't want to see that shit.
I was waiting for that type of reaction, bro. I was waiting for it. What, you're mad about the fact that the Colts are going to be on prime time, bro? Come on now. They got Jeff Saturday. He's the new head coach. He's bringing a whole new phase of Colts football to the world. Kev, you muted your mic.
That was an accident that, thank God, I wasn't heard. But they're gonna kill us.
They kill you?
They're
That
gonna
bad?
kill us. They're gonna kill us.
You have no faith. No faith.
Micah Parsons against that offensive line. We got to face T.J. Watt and Micah Parsons in back-to-back weeks, bro.
Guys almost beat the Eagles last week, though.
Can we write them a letter? Can we just say we don't want to play? Like, you guys got it. Like, I don't want to watch. I'm gonna watch both games, but still.
I'm just saying, like, y'all kind of gave the Eagles a little bit of run for their money last week.
Defensively, yes. Offensively, absolutely not. The play calling still dog shit. We talked about it last week. Jonathan Taylor was given 22 touches, but he was given 7 in the first drive, and then afterwards it was just sporadic, just to say that we fed him. I can't trust an offense that is going to be inconsistent at what is best. If running the ball works, there's no reason why we should stop. So, again, neither here nor there. That's next week. So I'm not going to give myself a heart attack.
I was
before we even get there.
I was waiting for that reaction, bro, because I knew you were going to hate it as soon as you saw it.
I'm good.
Yeah, but that Monday night game next week between the Saints and the Bucks, that one sucks.
Snooze fest. I'm good off that, bro. But this next one's about to give me the same reaction.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
So honestly, this is actually kind of fun for me. I get to basically sit back in my chair and just let Kev do his thing here, just pop off, get all of his emotions out for you guys to see. We're going to talk a little bit about UNC basketball. Kev is disappointed, to say the least, off of what the Tar Heels have been able to do the last 2 games. They were the number 1 ranked team before they lost their first game just a couple days ago. And then on Sunday, they lost to Alabama in a quadruple overtime game that finished with Alabama winning by the score of 103-101. Kev, I know you're very disappointed about UNC basketball right now based off of the 2 losses that they've had in a row. Just give me your thoughts about UNC basketball as we essentially transition into the month of December.
Dude, we look flat. We look cocky. We look arrogant. It looks like Hubert Davis just has taken a step back in terms of from the coaching aspect, because I've seen so many plays in just 2 games where he lets RJ Davis and Caleb Love do whatever they want. It's isolation basketball. I mean, Bill Walton is not the analyst and commentator that he once was. I mean, I'm not trying to be rude here, but they need to get his ass off television, because there are some things that he be saying, talking about people's birthdays that were like 2 weeks ago, making comments about being at games that he wasn't. Like, the guy is absolutely delusional. Either he has not all there, or he just genuinely just be saying shit to say shit. So that's my first comment, because Bill Walton is always at the Phil Knight Invitational, which is the tournament that they were at in Oregon. But man, he makes the game almost unbearable to watch with him narrating. But second, the fact that he was able to make the point that I was seeing, he was like, I want to see North Carolina move the basketball. I want to see it touch multiple players' hands before a shot is selected. Every final possession before the overtime had ended was clear out, let Caleb Love take a horrible shot, clear out, let RJ Davis run around in a circle and pull up for a mid-range jump shot. It's like, we didn't attack the paint in overtime in this game. We turned the ball over. People were in foul trouble. I mean, we were not attacking the rim in overtime. It was just jump shot after jump shot. We got to the free throw line maybe a couple of times in 4 overtimes, but Alabama played better. Alabama was able to get into the paint religiously. I mean, Baycott was in foul trouble. Pete Nance was in foul trouble. Leaky Black had gotten hurt at one point with his ankle. It was a mess. It did not look good. And then you look at the Iowa State game a few days ago, we had 5 turnovers in the final 2 minutes of the game. It was lazy passes, just mistimed turnovers, you name it. It just looked like we didn't care. It looked like we were overconfident, like, we'll get it back. We got this next possession. They ain't shit. They ain't going to do nothing. And we lost. And we lost both games, rightfully so. Because, again, from what it looks like from the outside in, it looks like the players are doing what they want. It doesn't look like there's a system being run. Quite frankly, ironically enough, it reminds me a lot of Dallas. Caleb Love today shot the ball 36 times. In what planet does a collegiate student need to put up that many shots? I want to know, like, on what planet does a 19, 20-year-old kid needs to put up that many? I know NBA players that don't reach that total of shots in 3-4 games. Why are you pulling that many times? I understand it was quadruple overtime, but before overtime had started, I think going into the second overtime, he had 30 shots. Why are you taking that many? 3 of 11 from 3. He was 13 of 36. That's under 50% by a lot. And you keep shooting. You keep throwing him up. He had 4 turnovers. He had 5 fouls. I get it was a career-high 34 points, but 34 points on 36 shots, that's less than a point a shot. Like, what are we fucking talking about right now? RJ Davis, 8 of 24. Again, another freaking junior. What are you doing taking 24 shots? Pete Nance had 4 shot attempts. He had like 28 the other night. What are we doing? Baycott had 12. Thankfully, he was able to get 10 rebounds and 20 points. But again, he had 6 turnovers. That is the biggest issue for us. How do we have 18 turnovers? Yes, they were the 18th ranked team in the country. They are no scrub, but they are not on our level. They are not at the ACC level. They are not at North Carolina basketball level. That is not arrogance. That is genuine facts. If we cut turnovers in half, we win this game in regulation by 20 points. It's not close. We don't move the ball. I mean, we played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 11 people today got minutes. And we had a total, we had 91 total shots as a team. 60 of those were RJ Davis and Caleb Love. That's over 70. That's like 75% of our shots were 2 kids. I don't agree with this. I don't care if Caleb went for 50. This is a collegiate program. This is not Caleb Love's team. This is not RJ Davis's team. We have shown multiple times throughout our tenure where we have pillars that are religiously going to be our offense. Yes. Is it usually 3 to 4 players consistently? Absolutely. Do we have 3 to 4 players offensively that are going to be scary like we used to have, like with the Justin Jacksons and the Joel Berrys and the freaking Raymond Feltons and Ty Lawsons and Tyler Hansbroughs? No. Armando Baycott's probably the best big in the ACC. Obviously, Pete Nance is a 5th-year senior. Caleb Love is one of the more dynamic guards in college basketball. RJ Davis is a very shifty and very crafty guard to get in and out of the paint. But in terms of depth, Puff Johnson, Cam Johnson's little brother, he's known for defense. He's not somebody that's going to go out there and give you 25 points. You have McCoy. You have a couple of freshmen here. It's like I don't have anybody that's really like gotta watch out for him. You know, that's a sleeper when he comes off the bench. No, we don't. Leaky Black's not an offensive player. He's there to anchor the defense, get rebounds, and find ways to turn the ball over on the other side. As a UNC basketball fan, I'm livid. These 2 losses should not have happened. I'm just absolutely flabbergasted that we lost to Iowa State by 5 points. They weren't even ranked. Like, how does that happen? And if I'm not mistaken, in that game, we had 14 turnovers. Like, what are we doing? Like, once again, in that game, 28 shots were RJ Davis and Caleb Love, which is over 50% of our shots for the game. We only shot the ball 50 times that game. And Caleb Love was 4 of 14, and RJ Davis was 5 of 14. Both of them 1 of 7 from 3. Last I checked, if the ball's not falling when you're shooting, next option, go attack the basket. I'm not some NCAA level coach. I'm not a basketball professional. I'm not someone that played at that level. But from what I understand in the sport, if it ain't falling, you got to change it up. But you keep shooting. So that's why you lose. 14, 18, what is that? 34, 14 and 18. That's 34 turnovers in the last
32.
32 turnovers. 32 turnovers in the last 2 games. It's unacceptable. That's why you lose. It looks like we're in a national championship hangover, and we didn't even win. Kansas is out here slapping teams, and we can't beat Iowa State and Alabama. We look like a fraud, and we look like last year was a fluke. Yes, it's early, but I'm saying it because that's how it looks. It's not good. It's sloppy, and I do not like how Hubie is letting them run the offense. There's no system here. He's standing there with his arms crossed like this. Do what you want. Bro, this isn't Michael Jordan. This isn't one of our superstar juggernaut teams where it was a guarantee we were going to the Final Four with the roster that we have. You're just letting 2 kids run a team by themselves and giving them a pass to do whatever the fuck they want. That's not basketball. Yet last year was great. It was a great run. We didn't win. So whatever happened, whatever success we had, it's null and void. It's a new season. This is not how you win a national championship. Trust me, I've been alive for a lot of their national championships. This isn't the formula to do it. So if they don't turn this around, they quickly will fall out of the top 25 because this is just not how you play team basketball at all in college.
You feel better?
I do. You know, again, it's 1 in the morning. I'm not going to sit here and scream and rant and rave. It's just it's frustrating to watch, bro. My teams can't fucking play sports. The Gators suck. The Tar Heels are losing. The Colts suck. The Yankees suck. The Mavericks suck. Like none of my teams want to fucking play right. It's just so aggravating.
I will say though, the one team that you used to support in college football was what team?
South Carolina just got the big upset against Clemson.
That's 2
Spencer Rattler.
That's 2 big wins that they've had the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, I forgot who they played last week. Was that Oklahoma?
No. They had like 2 big upsets.
No, I know Clemson was this past weekend, and the week before, I forgot who they played, but it was a big school.
I'll look it up. Give me a second.
Was it Auburn?
All right, so they beat Clemson this past weekend, but they beat Tennessee.
Yeah, but they lost Hooker for the year. He tore his ACL.
Yeah, but he tore his ACL late in the game. The game was already over by that point.
Okay.
The point that he had tore his ACL. Bro, they put up 63 points in that game.
Spencer out here looking like the top recruit that he was out of high school.
You see, he was smoking on that freaking top 10 pack, bro. He was smoking that cigar in the locker room like he was Joe Burrow and the boys. But
please,
I think it's a little too much hype for Spencer. Don't get me wrong, Spencer played really solid the last 2 weeks. I will give him
the credit that you give, but you can't be acting like you're going to the playoff or something.
Like we kind of have to put things into perspective. Like y'all boys slapped up on them at the beginning of November. Remember that game? What was the score? Like 38-6.
Some shit like that.
Beat them by damn near 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, it was a rout.
And that was with Anthony Richardson. And I know that you've had plenty to say about him this year.
Don't even get me started, bro. Before the 4th quarter had ended, at one point he was 0 for 12 in the second half in passing attempts. 0 for 12 in the entire second half.
I already know you're over it.
Bro, how are you 5 of 10, right? 5 of 10 in the first half.
Which is
and then you go 0 of 12. 5 of 10. 0 of 12.
I would just keep running the ball then at that point.
I mean, we did, and we ran the ball very efficiently, which is why we were in the game to begin with, because we were trying to keep the ball away from their offense. Because, I mean, for God's sakes, that game gives me PTSD because that quarterback, Jordan Travis, disgusting. Like that man is so mobile with his legs. And he's very accurate in certain instances to where he was able to extend so many plays to where we had 3 or 4 sacks. He's easily 5 to 7 yards in the backfield. Shakes, shifts, spins, stiff arm, breaks, and it ends up being breakaway 20-yard runs each time. Two of them were brought back. Well, not brought back, but they were. He ended up in the end zone, but he fell short both times because he gave himself up. And it's like, dude, that game easily they could have scored 60 some odd points.
Mhm.
Like he was just that elusive.
It was
And
that
mind you,
type of game. It could have been that
the-
type of game.
the Gators lead the nation or the SEC in takeaways, and we just could not do anything to stop him. It was again, it was an entertaining game. Not to shift this into college basketball or college football, but it's just the preview of like college sports are just so much more entertaining as of late. The more that I watch them, because these kids are playing for their futures. Like some of these NFL games, you go down big enough, nobody gives a shit. You put in your second string, your starting quarterback is in there for incentives. Oh, I got to complete 5 more passes for $25,000 for this next bonus. Bro, these kids are like, yo, I want to make it to that level, and
Yeah.
these kids are diving and fighting and giving it all they got. It's just crazy.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, it's like, well, there's an incentive too. It's like they're trying to get to that next level, like you said. I do have to ask you before we end up wrapping this up. Did you get a chance to see Michigan slap up Ohio State this past weekend?
I saw the start of the second half, and I saw that Ohio State came out flat, and that Michigan was just able to just destroy that defense.
Gashed them. I think Donovan Edwards, I think, is the running back for Michigan. Bro, he had 2 carries in the fourth quarter. One was like for 75, and then like the other one was for 85. He had a $150 just in the fourth quarter alone, rushing the ball.
I know Tyree was pissed.
Down year. It's pretty much.
Listen.
And they let 11-1. It's a down year.
Listen, I got one thing to say about Ohio State. Bring that boy Marvin Harrison Jr. home.
Oh, to Indy. Bro.
Follow in your daddy's footsteps and be a legend.
Y'all better finish with a top 5 pick if you're going to try to get him.
Shit. I better see Matt Ryan throw another 7 to 10 interceptions. Listen, I don't like tanking, but if I go get me Marvin Harrison Jr., I'll be all right.
Why don't you get Sam Ellinger from the Colts and Patriot game? Because that was, I'm just saying, if you want to go full tank here, you pull the offensive line back to that Patriot performance where they gave up, 9 sacks that game? Mm-hmm. And then they could just go full on tank and, maybe they could make it happen. But no, he's nice. He's nice.
Bro, that boy's an animal. I think they showed a statistic. He had 100 targets at one point during that game. 0 drops.
100 targets in a game?
No, like in the season. At one point during that game, there was a number on the bottom where he was targeted 100 times at that point through the year, and he had no drops.
I wouldn't be surprised if they targeted him 100 times in a game. I mean, they might as well at this point. He's nice. Dude, he's super nice.
He's nasty.
I don't know if he's as good as his dad was. I mean, his dad is a Hall of Fame wide receiver. I mean, that's tough
Super
to follow
Bowl champ
up.
Too, but still, I mean, listen, the numbers that boy be putting up. I remember, I think the opening game he had like 183 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like, yeah. And there were multiple games afterwards where he put up similar numbers. So it's not like it was a fluke. He's quick. He's got good hands like his dad. He's got great separation capabilities, and he's got some swag, man. He had a freaking he had an Apple Watch and some Louis cleats a couple months ago, dude.
Yeah.
He chilling.
He was swagging out that one game. I remember he was swagging out, but he has to get bigger. He's a little skinny.
Well, yeah. I mean, Marvin was skinny his whole career.
At least he had a little bit more of a build, going into the NFL. But I mean,
Marvin was short though too. Marvin was like what, 6 feet, 6'1"? He wasn't even that tall.
Maybe 6'2" at best, maybe.
But like that's what I'm saying. If you see Marvin Harrison in the street, as opposed to like a DK Metcalf, you'd be like, oh, he looks like a regular guy, and then you're like, oh, he's got to play football. Like it's like Marvin Harrison was not somebody that was like overly intimidating.
Marvin Harrison is 6 feet, 6 feet flat.
6 feet, probably like 190 pounds soaking wet. Maybe even less.
Marvin Harrison Jr. is 6'4".
Bring him home, baby.
You want it to happen.
Oh, man, I'd love to happen. Sabo's also about to start coughing, so just in case anybody hears, my dog has kennel cough, everybody. So
you got one problem with Marvin Harrison Jr., though.
I got no quarterback.
Who's the hell is going to throw him the football? Because he ain't got Peyton Manning back there. I can tell you that.
No, listen. It's a process. Check this out, right? I got an idea.
Oh.
Arch Manning's gonna play at Texas. He's gonna come out as a sophomore, and we're just gonna listen. We're gonna get Marvin Harrison Jr. If he decides to go back, then we're gonna get them both.
Both with an F,
Both of them. Both of them. To
bro.
quote my big dog Fred, both of them.
You talk about pipe dreams here, my guy. Pipe
Pipe
dreams
dreams. Listen, listen. It is written in history in stone. Manning
already.
and Harrison
Hasn't
shall
even happened.
be reunited.
That'd be kind of cool though. It ain't gonna
I would
happen, but
I think I'd probably cry, like full tears of happiness. We can suck for the remainder of their careers, but to have like another Manning and another Harrison, like that'd be a dream come true.
even if you guys lose every game,
I'd be happy for a little bit, then I'd get mad and say kick them the fuck out.
and you still blame Frank Reich for them losing.
I would probably blame a lot of people for the most part. If you butcher that tandem, I'd yell at a lot of people.
You better pray that Chris Ballard does something to make it happen.
We'll see what happens. But guys, it is 1:15 in the morning. It's a little on the late side. We recorded late. I had an emergency to respond to at my girlfriend's house. But we're here. We're completed. We're done. It's good to be back in the booth. We got plenty of content rolling for the rest of the week. And, we'll keep you guys abreast with everything in case there are any changes. But hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. Hope that everybody is going to have a good start to their week. And Kyle, that's everything I got, man.
I'm good. I'll basically just finish it out with this. Obviously, just appreciate you guys tuning in, whether it was watching us on YouTube, listening to us on the audio platforms. We definitely appreciate the support. Like Kev said, well, plenty of content coming throughout the week, so definitely stay tuned for that. And we'll be back here Thursday night for the record. It'll be uploaded on Friday for another episode. So, like I already said, we got plenty of content coming for you guys, and hopefully you guys support us as we go along. But with that said, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys later.